Hi, everyone. I'm BJ. I'm a genealogist and librarian here in Maine. And tonight I'm going to, and I know this is once again, and some of you will have seen parts of this, but Family Search has been updating their full text search feature. And so I figured it was time to do another program about it because it really is a pretty amazing feature. This is the sort of thing that when I started doing genealogy, 27 years ago or whatever it was, seriously, would have seemed like it was out of science fiction. Um, Even 10 years ago, I'm not sure any of us really thought this would come to be anywhere near as early as it has. And so it's not perfect, but I'm a big advocate of using it both to see if you're getting stuff that you're otherwise missing. And the more people use it, the more incentive they have to develop it further and to add more records like they're doing. And so um, that's why I figure it's worth showing you guys what it is and what it's doing and where we are with it these days. So going to mostly be just in Chrome showing you how it works. Um, Although I have the one bit I do have in a PowerPoint because I'm not at an affiliate library. I stopped yesterday at the West Paris Library in a little town in Maine that Brenda, the librarian, took my advice and became an affiliate library. So there are some records I can see if I'm on their network that I can't see at home. Not the only library in Maine that has this, but if your library doesn't, you may want to suggest to the director or the head of reference services that they do it because it's free. And from what librarians have told me, once they're on the map that Family Search has of affiliate libraries, it brings people in that have never been in the library before. So from a library standpoint, it's free is good. New people foot traffic is good. So but I went in there yesterday, so I have a couple of those screenshots in a PowerPoint to show you the difference. So let me start my screen sharing and do the other couple bits of housekeeping I have to do to keep up with this. Okay, so here we're at, you should be seeing the front page of Family Search. And the way to get to the full text is to go down here, down at the bottom, where it says View Experiments, click here. And then again, just scroll and go to the experiment. Full text search. And there are a bunch of ways you can use this. And one of the ways, the easiest way is a person's name. And so I pulled up a few of these to begin with so we could see them. Um, so I went looking for one of my ancestors whose name is Azariah Horton. And when I put this in, you can see I've got more than 2.5 million results. That's an awful lot. I'm not going to scroll through 2,000 or 2 million plus results. So there are a couple ways to handle this. One is I can narrow it by place, time, collection, or type of record. So I know that my Azariah Horton lived in New Jersey, so I can go to place, United States, New Jersey, and hit apply. which gets me down to about 40,000 results. Well, that's still an awful lot. And it has the problem that what if his interests bled over into New York or Pennsylvania? So one of the other ways I can do this, let's take that off. I can put quotation marks around his name. So I'm only getting, and it turns out when you do this, you get the exact phrase, or if the two names are within a couple words of each other. Um, so this gets me down to 610. And that's getting down to enough, few enough that I could scroll through all of those and see if I'm interested. And as you see, this first one is a New York deed. Turns out this is the prison of one of my ancestors, a nephew of my Azariah Horton. Um, and so, but as you can see, we're looking through Westchester, New York. Um, Eventually, we will get to, and what we can do here, now we can go and do place and do United States and do New Jersey. And now most of these are getting down to be either my Azariah's brother or, I'm sorry, my foster Horton's brother, another child of the Azariah Horton I'm looking for. And you can see one of the things they've done recently, they added all sorts of stuff. So you get, for example, let me show you here, you get some religious records. Um, which have been added. You get court records. Um, so here we have an index to miscellaneous New Jersey records that refers you to further um, resources. And again, this is handy because not every genealogy library has this. For example, this book, the state library here in Maine doesn't have. And I could, yes, I could sit and go through the catalog at Familysearch, but this helps me narrow down things pretty quickly. So that's helpful. Let me show you some of the other things that might come up. Here's a series of books, and I'm pretty sure the state library actually has this. I forgot to check, but it's published colonial documents from New Jersey. And as you can see, we've got a bunch of Hortons here and references to their probate records for the most part. It's a calendar of wills. And what's interesting on this is these I would have found easily. But here we have one where my several greats grandfather is named as the guardian of a woman, a woman named Percy Hedges. And if you look at a traditional probate index, she's indexed, and Gideon, her father, is indexed, but Foster Horton wasn't. And so this gives me a little extra information about Foster Horton, where he was. In 1784, he's living in New Jersey, um, and people, you know, who are willing to put money up. So are probably either relatives or close friends. If they're willing to put money up to say, we'll make sure that Foster Horton does his job as Mercy or Marcy's guardian. And so this is the big reason I'm loving um, the full text searches. It's finding things where people are witnesses where their bonds, where they're putting up a bond, where they're an heir, or they owe money to an estate, or the estate owes them money. And all of these are things that are not in traditional probate indexes. So that's part of what you're finding. And as I said, you're also getting, here we have a court record. And I love that it is reading this 18th century handwriting. You know, even 5 years ago, I think a lot of us would have said that optical character recognition, machine reading of pre-20th century actually any handwriting. When I think about my father's handwriting, for example, um, that we'd be able to do this. I think people would have said, yeah, maybe in 50 years, but it's been 5 years. Um, and again, here we have Foster Horton listed as a juror, which tells you where he's living. In general, at this time period, it probably means he's a landowner. Um, so that's something worth keeping in mind. So I think, yeah, we've gone through that screen. Let's get the next screen up. So here's one of the other interesting ones. We're going to go here. Oops, no. Here we go. And again, this is Lincoln Stetson's one of my ancestors. And some of you were here when I put his name in and discovered, as far as I know, he's born in Scituate, Massachusetts in 1770 something, moves to Salem in the 1790s. He's a shipwright. So moving to Salem makes perfect sense. He goes on the first voyage for U.S. trading to Japan, comes back by about 1800. And as far as I can tell, pretty much is, you know, I have, until he dies in the 1860s, I've got census records, I've got um, records, I've got newspaper ads, I've got city directories, I've got kids' births, the whole works. As far as I can tell, he lived in Salem the rest of his life. But I would have never thought to look in Knox County, Maine. But here he is as buying property in Knox County, Maine. From Jacob Stetson, who I think is a cousin, and I'm guessing he's helping out somehow financially, um, because he sells the land back to Jacob in about 5 years. But this is one of the other things where, particularly if you have someone whose name isn't like Robert Thompson, you may want to do searches where you are looking by year, or in this case, just, you know, by the name, because sometimes you're going to find someone somewhere you weren't expecting. They lived somewhere for 2 years between census returns. If you have somebody who left Maine in 1870 to try to make a living out west and decided that they wanted to move back, but they're out in Indiana from 1873 to 1877, this may be the only way to find that. So that's something to be aware of. But yeah, I've narrowed this down to just Maine because I wanted to show you this. But if I take that away, again, it comes up as the second match. And as I said, my jaw pretty much dropped when I saw that because I didn't think I had anything new to find about him. His wife, yes, I can't find her before their marriage. And one reason I was looking for her was the hopes that he would be listed in a father-in-law's deed or probate. And I can tell you that I have helped people find female ancestors' maiden names in some cases because they are listed in a deed or a will by their married name in a case where we weren't able to find a marriage record. So that's really helpful. The other thing that's interesting, I put in a search here for, let's see if I can get back to the search terms here. No, I'm going to have to go back here. And what I put in was, sorry, it, this is another case. This is one where I was looking for a Lincoln Stetson, and because of it being the county of Lincoln and there was another Stetson, it came up. But what's nice on this is that, this is one from back when Maine was still part of Massachusetts. And so you get those identifiers and you don't have to worry as much where the physical record ended up. And yeah, I don't know why my other new puzzle about Lincoln Stetson. I don't know if this is the same one or not. He's old enough to be this person, but I'm not sure. So I just found this one today. So I need to look at that. But again, one of the things to think about is how have county boundaries in Maine changed? So this is the county boundaries as of 1799. And you can see that other than Lincoln County, all of the others existing at the time basically went up to the Canadian border, which was not settled yet. This northern border of Maine isn't settled until the 1840s. But then I can click on 1805 here, and you can see Oxford's been carved out. And then 1808, there's just a little change. Let's go up to about 1820, and you can see Somerset and Penobscot have been pulled off. Um, and so if you're looking by town name, it can overcome some of this. So one of the interesting ones is if we go back to the full text search, the town I grew up in was called Rustfield before it was Norway. And was incorporated as Norway in 1797. So I'm looking for things around the 1790 census because I'm working on one of my gazillion projects I'm working on is some sketches for the Maine in 1790s project that the Maine Genealogical Society is doing, where they're trying to do a profile for each household in the 1790 census. So I can search Rustfield, and then obviously I don't want Kansas, but it was Cumberland at this time. And so I can do this and I can do US and Maine, and it does distinguish Maine even before Maine becomes a state. So now I'm just looking at anything having to do with Maine that mentions the name Rustfield for what is now the town of Norway. And so I'd be able to look through these to make sure I'm not missing a deed on somebody where the handwriting isn't clear or anything else. And as you can see, you're getting some printed records, you're getting some church records, some cemetery. They've got some of the main old cemetery inscription project stuff in here. This is new. They're getting documents at an incredible rate. Um, but as you can see, this is mostly land and cemetery records, but it will help you with those towns that no longer are. Pownallboro, which is now Wiscasset, Dearborn, which got divided up among 3 or 4 other towns. And it can help you around some of the county boundary changes that happened from the late 18th century to the mid 19th century fairly frequently. So now I'm going to show you one of the other neat things that they've done. Let me pull it here. So I've gone to the catalog and um, searched Middleton, Massachusetts, because I happen to know that this was one where this would work. Um, and gotten these results. And if I click through to the church records, we'll go down here, and it's hard to see, but this is where I'm going to switch to the PowerPoint for a minute. So when I'm at home and I go to look for the church records for Middleton, Massachusetts, instead of just a camera, there's a camera and a caution sign, which means that you need to be at an affiliate library or family history center at a local LDS church or at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City to see this. So I went to the West Paris Library and notice here, this is that record. And notice there's no function sign. I was able to get in and read these records sitting there at the library, which isn't quite as convenient as sitting at home, but it's a lot easier to do that with the 20 some hours a week the library's open, or flying to Salt Lake City. And, family history centers and LDS/Mormon churches around the country are great, but again, they're volunteer run and many of them are only open 2 or 3 hours a week. So the affiliate libraries are often the place you can get to see these. Um, and so if we page down, here's another one. These are town records from Middleton. And what's nice here, these were not locked, but see what looks like, I don't know, does that look like a prescription pamphlet or something to you here? See this? That indicates that this item is now in the full text search. And if you click on this, you will go to, oops, hit the wrong thing there. You will go through to the full text search from the catalog record. That's new. It's a wonderful new feature. So let's go back to here and tinker with that for a minute. So here you see we're at that same record. This is the town records. And this you can see, this one's not locked. I could go in and read that, but you can't search it. This one, I can click on this and it takes me through to this. And so now within this record group, let's search for the name Upton. Oops. And so instead of 785 records, we're going to hit search. And it is in there 247 times. So you can now, and this is why I wanted to do this tonight as the update. You can now go from a catalog item to that item in the full text search, as opposed to having to figure out if that item is in there. So this is another, you know, searching breakthrough for using these. Everyone with me so far? Oh, that's a really nice new feature. So let's take a look at another interesting case. here we have the town. No, that's not the one I want. This is the one I want. So here we have the tax records for Middleton from 1728 to 1799, and they're locked. What's interesting, and I don't know why, the valuations are actually here, unlinked, and part of the full search. So if I go to this, I can search for my ancestor's attic. And let's just do his first name. And there's somebody named Zadok 13 times in these records. And yes, in the past, when this was only available as essentially an online microfilm, I have scrolled through and looked for him. But one of these, I'm going to go and redo to make sure that my tired eyes didn't miss. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is, having seen some of this, I am going to also look for Laddock because often it gets transcribed that way. Notice he's in there 10 times as Laddock, or 10 people are in there, or 10 mentions of a Laddock. As you can see, I'm pretty sure these two are mine. Um, and so one of the things as you're using this, like with newspaper OCR, where, for example, if you're looking for an Amy Wilkins, you may want to look for an Army Wilkins as well, because RN and M get mixed up a lot in the OCR. You want to keep track of some of these letters that may be missed because of handwriting. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that the valuation role is open, full text searchable, but the tax records themselves, you need to be at a family history center. And that's a difference in the contract. I don't know whether with Familysearch, I don't know whether that's a case of they're held by different repositories, or if it's was different clerks, or there was different concerns about the information. Um, Sometimes this happens. This is finishes in 1799. I've seen things where it goes into the 20th century, and that's why you can't see it. Um, so that's an interesting little tidbit there. Now, let's go back. And so we're going to go back to the main page. I'm going to do this again so you can see this. We're at the Familysearch homepage. To go down all the way to the view experiments. And go to the experiment. And I want to show you a bit of how you can be a little flexible. So I'm going to look for Danvers and Dower. So Danvers is the town name. And Dower shows up in both wills and deeds of dealing with the widow's portion of her husband's estate in the probate wills, and releasing her dower in land records means that she has the right to a third of the property when her husband dies, and so she had to release that in order for land to be sold. And so notice I'm not putting anything else in here. I'm going to hit search, and you'll see that again I'm getting 20 million hits. That's a whole lot more than I need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to narrow this to place, to the US, and to Massachusetts, and to Essex County, which is where Danvers is. I'm not going to go further down because a lot of these will be at the county level. I'm going to hit apply. So we're down to under 4 million. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm looking at the 1700s, and I'm interested in women who were widows in 1790. So I'm going to go for the category of the decade that's from 1780 to 1789 and hit apply. Gets me down to 5,000. So we're narrowing it down. And then I can, the record type, um, the legal versus others, includes the court records, the land records, and the probate records. So that's not that helpful. But if we go to the collection, we can choose wills and deeds and apply. And, this is still more than I'd probably want to go through. I'd probably start looking at the names of the women who are listed in the 1790 census because it was only head of household. So if a woman is listed, she's a widow. Um, but by doing this, it gets me down to a reasonable number to sit here and scroll through. And if we want to change this, let's say we want to go to Middleton. Of course, if I could type, we'd be in good shape. And that it changed, but I left those filters, and you can see it's doing the same thing here with pulling up everything from the 1780s that mentions dower. Me on that. Um, I and I could even go further and do seller because you'll find that some of these are dividing the house. Um, so let's look at this one. Yeah. This case where the widow is getting the cellar underneath the front room, the said 2/3 in the northerly part, and the liberty to pass and repass through the said entryway. And so this is how a man was making legally sure his widow was going to be taken care of. For those of us who have some interest in social history as well as family history, this could be a real rabbit hole. Um, I have done things like look for, um, you can look for a woman by her married name to see if she comes up that way. You can look by an address in some of the more recent deeds. Um, you can see a neighbor. If you find your ancestor maybe listed as a witness or a neighbor, and you can then look for further information that way. Um, so it's really some interesting stuff. And I'm fascinated the extent to which, if we go back, um, let's do a let's say you want to start over again. You can just hit reset down here, and it's supposed to clear everything. But we'll go, yeah, there we go. So what I'm going to look for in this case is again a name. Zebulon Hill. So as you can see, I've looked for him before. And we're going to stay with Essex County and do the year 1700s and then the 1790s and apply. Okay, I want the 1690s. For this example. And what's really impressive is it is indeed reading these early handwritten records. I think I chose the right one here. Yeah. So this was written in the 1690s. And it's still managing, and this is actually fairly clearly written for that time period. There's another one that it's amazing they managed to read it. But, again, here's a deed. Or here's the index to some deeds. That, very early handwriting that it is managing to read. Now, I will tell you there are some drawbacks to this whole process. If you're looking for somebody who's a Robert Smith, unless he's got a really unusual wife's name or some other such thing, you're going to be finding too many results. If your ancestor was a court clerk or a judge, you may find way more records than you're interested in plowing through. You can add, so if we go back to the full text, and let's add Abigail here as a keyword, we get two mentioning Zebulun's daughters. So you can find daughters and wives often. The wives are often mentioned because of the dower. Daughters are often mentioned, if a man lived to be old enough that his daughter was married, you may find her under her married name, which is a really nice thing to find if you haven't found a marriage record for her. So at this point, any questions?
BJ, what would you say are the biggest changes from in Familysearch, this full text editing, full text search? What are the biggest changes from before and now?
The biggest change is that link from the catalog. So that, you now can go from seeing that the tax records for a town have
Yeah.
been entered into the full text search. A couple months ago, you had to go into the full text search and see if they came up. And now you can go into the catalog, look for a particular document set, and see that you can go to the full text search. That's the biggest change. Other than that, and just how many more they've added.
Oh, wow.
My understanding is I was listening to somebody talk just the other day, and they're adding things at a rate of millions, practically millions of records a week.
Oh, ooh.
Um, they're up to like 1.5 billion records or something like that. And they're assuming that that's going to hit 2.5 sometime this year from and that was somebody he was talking at the BYU family history conference the other day.
Uh-huh.
So I'm assuming that if he's that BYU family history program, he's got an inside track on what they're doing, even if
Yeah.
he's not directly involved. Um, but I think that, but yeah, that the reason I decided to do this again was that being able, and I want to show that to you one more time so you guys
Okay.
can see how neat it is to be able to do that. So, let's say I'm looking for, let's go Kennebec County. Let's see if this is in there and hit search. So I'm in the catalog. I'm not in the full text search. And we're going to go to court records and let's see what we've got. Uh, Common pleas. None of these are in the full text yet. See, there's not that little paper thingy.
Yeah.
So let's go back and see what we can find. Let's go into land and property and see if those are in yet. These are, see this extra icon?
Oh,
So I,
that's what tells you that it's been
yeah,
scanned.
so the camera tells you it's been scanned and you
Okay.
can view a digital copy. But if we go here, we're going to this, where you'd have to look at the old indexes that go with the deed books at the county courthouse.
Yeah.
Whereas if we go, oops, let's go back here. We click on this. Let's actually go into one that's actual records, not the index. This is in, and these are all of the pages of deeds on that particular reel of microfilm that are also in the full text search. See how it's put that number here? So
Yeah.
here we have the land records. I don't remember which one I clicked through to. Let's take a look. We want 471. Must be on a different page. Oh, here
Right
it is.
there.
So we clicked through on this. And what this is doing is instead of the entire full text search with the gazillion and a half records, this is taking me just to the records that are full text search that were
Ah,
on this
nice.
reel of microfilm.
I got it. I see the difference now. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of saying, do I need to, figuring out by going in and saying, deed for this county for this time period, are those here? You can now go to the catalog and say, here's this county's land records, and I can either search frame by frame, which you may still want to do in some cases, or I
Hmm.
can go to the full text search and then I can do something like put in Hallowell. And so anything that's on this old microfilm that mentions Hallowell will come up.
Hmm. That saves a lot of time.
Yeah. And the reason this is nice is, for example, look here, Elijah. Now, Joy is a last name that's probably going to be spelled correctly, but I've seen some real clunkers for how Sewell can be written and transcribed.
Hmm.
Um, but this also then, if you're looking for something where you're not quite sure whether you want or son, you could put in the name, say, let's put in the name Sewell now. And we'll get down to only records that mention both Sewell and Hallowell in this time period on this one. And then you could go back to, okay, they didn't do anything in 1804, 1805, what's the next, and go through that way. But
Hmm.
this is the difference. This column of the thing that looks like a paper with
I see.
writing on it is the new thing that you know can really help you focus down on. I'm hoping, at least from the couple things I've done so far, it's helping me when you're dealing with areas with huge populations. When you're looking for things in a city like Boston, where you're going, it's one thing to look at Hollowell, Maine
Yeah.
for something in the early 19th century when you might have a few thousand people. But if you're looking for something in Boston or New York in the 1890s, being able to narrow that down this way is going to be a big help. Does that make sense to everybody?
I've got a different but sort of related question. Let's say you're putting in a keyword or a name or something like that, and you have alternate spellings. I'm thinking of my grandmother's last name, Gaspar, Gaspar, or sometimes Gasper, Gasper. Is there a
And
way
it,
to?
you probably sometimes starts with a C or a K as well. For the most part, they have not built a lot of that into this yet. You're going to
Ah,
have to go through. I've heard that's coming, but I think that's a level of complexity of search
is
and
that
stuff that they haven't done yet on this.
because I've heard of putting GASP question mark R or something
Yes,
like that.
are some, if you look down here, you
Oh,
can use um
oh, okay.
jail cards, but it won't pull up
Oh,
PA.
right there, next to the last, find different spellings. Yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
so
Okay, that's good.
so you can do that.
Okay, that's good.
And you can use a minus. You see here, let me blow this up so you guys can actually see it. The one here, if that people don't always, oh, come on, computer. This is the other really handy one is if you put a minus in front of something, it will
Okay,
exclude those records. So if you've got somebody where you don't want, let's say they want Zebulon Hill, the Cooper, not Zebulon Hill, the farmer. I can put minus farmer. Now
okay.
that would eliminate if he's selling land to Robert Smith farmer, but it would at least in some cases, or if you've got a cousin, you know, Wilberforce Smith, who's the county clerk and is in every single record,
Hmm. Oh yeah,
looking for a, or he is the court clerk, but you want to find the land records. You can do minus Wilberforce, and so that way you're only finding your ancestor, Michael Smith or
yeah,
whatever. So
yeah,
there are, or if you've got somebody who, you're looking for someone and they've been in two different towns and you want to find all the things in one town versus the other, you can do that minus. Um, and that and the wild card are the things. Um, I found that the exact phrase and the plus I use some, but I've really been playing around with these And I like that they have this right here on every page
Good.
with the search. You don't have to go looking on another page to find those, like some websites. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
now in most cases, and I haven't tried it here, you can only use one wild card, but it will get you like the Casper with an AR versus ER.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ernest.
Is it possible that might help me with my Amaziah because of the time period? And you said it didn't recognize Maine as opposed
It does
to
usually recognize Maine as separate. It was separate enough from Massachusetts in the record keeping that generally it does, but I would look for your Amaziah in multiple ways here. I would look in Maine, I'd look in Massachusetts, I'd look where he ended up, I'd look with the exact phrase quotes on his name, I'd look without them. You want to play around because you know the computer is stupid. It's still only reading exactly what's there. And
I
I
was
would also look for like Amalia because especially at the beginning of a name, but even in the middle, I have seen Z's mistaken for L's. Um, like you saw with Zadok and Laddick. Um, I would also look if you know the town he's in, I'd look for the town and just the last name because he may be in a record as A last name. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I was looking that I thought maybe his grandfather might have left him something before they left for Pennsylvania. And because he was born in 1807, that's the time period.
Yeah. So yeah, if you have and this is one of those places if you have say potential parents, you want to look by those as well as by the kid. I have a couple cases where you know there are two families of the same name in central New York, say in the 1820 or 30 census. And by 1850, person I'm looking for has their own household. So they're not with a parent anymore. And looking at the parent for so looking at the potential parents as well as the children to see if they're mentioned just by first name, because it may just say to my son Amaziah and Zebulun and my daughters Abigail and Sarah. But if you look for the potential father, you may get that. So you don't want to rely on exact search because you may have cases where you don't get the child's name with an exact search. But you will get the child's name out of this, whereas traditional indexing of both the deeds and the probate files only dealt with the person buying and selling or the person who died. And you didn't get the witnesses, the neighbors. Sometimes on land records, you get, and in wills, actually, you get where somebody got the land. It was an inheritance from my father. Um, and so you want to be really flexible and just do sort of every search you can think of.
We're back to, I just know the name, the state, and the year.
Yep. And so you want to play around with the people with that last name in Maine. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay. Where are we? And stop sharing.